Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
What does it take to put together a successful workout program? Well, as a trainer, you must know quite a bit of information about an individual client. Now, you've got demographics, you've got height, weight, sex, different measurements, circumference measurements, body fat measurements. You also need to know goals, what their plans are, with the whole reason they came to you. Schedules are important because if we set up a great program, but schedule becomes a problem, now we're creating yet another challenge on top of the challenge of actually getting in shape. Health history is important. We actually take a whole questionnaire in called a HRA, Health Risk Appraisal, which goes on for quite a few pages. We actually tell people that that's your first workout. Wear out your wrist when you're filling out that paperwork. But health history is important. Fitness history, what you've done in the past, what you like to do, what you don't mind doing, what you absolutely hate. Likes and dislikes. That goes to that fitness history, but it also goes to, I don't care for circuit training. I don't care to be fast. I want to go a little bit slower. I hate this particular exercise. I don't like to run. I don't like this kind of cardio piece. I don't like to whatever. Or I really love boxing. I love the elliptical, whatever. People's lifestyle, very important. When I was talking about the live aging, I spoke about the 4 components of ability. And one of the components, besides fitness, nutrition, and mindset, is, of course, lifestyle. So lifestyle plays a part. And above all, since our goal is to find everyone's level of wellness, we are looking for their why. So there's quite a bit of information that you get to learn how to put together a program for a client. If you don't dive that deep and get that kind of information about a client, then you're not training a person, you're training a program. There's a world of difference trying to get somebody to train to your program instead of training that individual. In every program, there is some aspect of what we call the FITT Principle. Now, there's quite a bit of information out on the FITT Principle because it's changed a bit over the years, but we're going to talk about that. Whenever you're putting together your own program, the FITT Principle needs to be a part of it, needs to at least play some part in your program. Now, the FITT Principle is an acronym, FIT, and they've actually added a second T to it, FITT, and it stands for frequency, intensity, time, and the last one is actually type, and that's been added in the recent years, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But every fitness program has aspects of frequency, intensity, time, and type. And when you're trying to make differences, you're trying to make changes, one of those aspects needs to be changed, needs to be tweaked, either frequency, intensity, time, and I'll have to say sometimes type. Let me give you a definition of each of them. Frequency, as you might expect, this refers to how often you will exercise. After any form of exercise is performed, your body completes a process of rebuilding and repairing. We talk about this as actually part of the whole metabolism. When you're working out, especially doing resistance training, but even in cardiovascular, you are tearing muscle tissue. We've talked about this in the muscle podcast. You're actually breaking it down. And if a trainer tells you they're building up, well, indirectly, but they're building up by breaking down. The hypertrophy, that muscle kind of swollen a little bit, you feel after a workout, it's just blood being pumped into that area because you have actually torn fibers. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. In tearing fibers, you feel a burn. And think about this. You're doing 10 reps of something, 15, 20 reps of something. The thing that typically makes you stop is the burn. Feel the burn. Well, that actually is lactic acid. When the muscle tears, it releases some of the liquid that comes out as lactic acid, and it burns, which is why you have that sensation. It is your body's system of letting you know, hey, stop, that's enough. Frequency, as you might expect, refers to how often you will exercise. Determining the frequency of exercise is important in order to find a balance that provides just enough stress for the body to adapt and allows enough time for rest and healing. Intensity is defined as the amount of effort or work that must be invested in specific exercise workout. And this too requires a good balance to ensure that the intensity is hard enough to overload the body, but not so difficult that it results in overtraining, injury, or burnout. Time, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, I know. Time is simply how long an individual session should last. This does vary, as do each of these, according to the other. And the one they've added recently, I'm not a huge fan of them adding this because frequency, intensity, and time pretty well describes it. When you get into type, you start getting into that same thought process that brought us the type of food is the problem. But I'll throw it in here if you take it with a grain of salt and you also listen to my full explanation. But type is what type of exercise you will be doing. And will it be specifically cardiovascular? Will it be resistance training, or a combination of both? And what specific exercises will you perform? And that's what dealing with tight. Let's start with frequency. Frequency, the reason it's so important is that it has to do with the repair process. Now, you remember when we were talking about metabolism and we were also talking about muscle development and even flexibility, we covered the idea that we're trying to break down muscle tissue. We're actually tearing it. We're breaking down muscle tissue in order for it to repair and become stronger. The analogy I like to use, it's just like us looking at your body going, wrong, do it again. Wrong, do it again. It builds a big muscle. Wrong, do it again. And it builds it stronger and stronger and stronger. That's what a workout is. Tearing muscle fibers, you basically told your body, hey, look, that's wrong. Not strong enough. Got to make it stronger. And it uses protein and calories to build the muscle back stronger. Not so much bigger as stronger. Well, frequency has a lot to do with that because this is why you shouldn't, in no way, shape, or form, it's exercise 101. I know a lot of people do it, but you should not take a muscle to failure on Monday and then turn around on Tuesday and take that same muscles to failure, no matter how incredibly tough you think you are. Our bodies are made and grow muscle the same way. It takes roughly 72 hours to start to begin atrophy. In other words, muscles breaking down. And before they break down, before your body starts cannibalizing them, of course, you want to exercise them again. You want to catch it right in that sweet spot. So frequency has a lot to do with that. And making sure that you're meeting that right around 48-hour window is a pretty safe bet. Depending on the intensity of your exercise, and see what I was saying earlier, each one of these depended on the other. That 48-hour window is pretty well a good rule of thumb on how soon you should break that muscle out again. They say the recommended frequency is 2 to 3 non-consecutive days a week, or at least 1 to 2 days between sessions. And that's really what I go with. That's why I use that 48-hour rule. Your frequency, however, will often depend on the workouts you're doing, because you want to work your muscles at least 2 times a week. If you do a split routine like upper body one day, lower body the next, your workouts will be more frequent than total body workouts. So you can shred your upper body and on Monday, and then Tuesday, shred the lower body, really hit it hard and go deep into it. Therefore, come Wednesday, your upper body has had time to rest. And if you end up splitting up even more diversified, you split the body even more so. The old chest, triceps, shoulder, chest and triceps, back and biceps, quads, and then hamstrings, these kind of things, the old 4-day, 5-day routine. Well, those routines allow you actually to go deeper into the muscle. You can actually break them down even more. And because you're going to take a little bit longer to repair, the more damage you do to the muscle, the longer time you need in between. But I like this rule of thumb. And the reason to say that is that let's say you do a 4-day-a-week breakdown. Well, if you do your chest, triceps, and shoulders on Monday and you don't repeat it again till the next Monday, well, you've waited a long time. Atrophy has actually started to set in. Or if you happen to miss a Monday, well, you may only work on that muscle body part 3 times a month. So I actually like a more compact routine, but it is different for every person. But that tells you a little bit more about frequency as far as strength training is concerned. Cardio now, depending on your goal, guidelines recommend moderate exercise 5 or more days a week, or intense cardio 3 days a week to improve your health. Now, the reason they mention less days for intense cardio is that typically in intense or aggressive cardio, you are more likely to start breaking down muscle tissue. You're more likely to get into somewhat of an anabolic state, or where you're really feeling a big burn in your muscles. And if you're feeling a big burn, then you're tearing down a lot of muscle tissue. This is why you see a lot of ultra-endurance athletes. I hate to pick on runners. It's an example I like to use, but you see this in cyclists. You see this in a lot of people that are what I call one exercise focused. They only run, or they only bike. And they get addictive. And I understand why. That endorphin feel, that high, that energy level, that rush, and also that feeling that if I'm not cycling, then I'm gaining weight. I'm getting out of shape.
I think Rick James said it best when he said, cycling is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, exactly right.
Or was that something else? Yeah. I don't remember.
I'm not sure Rick James, that was his exact quote, but at least the thought process is there. That's for sure. But anyway, that's why people get addicted to the runner's high. They get addicted to that camaraderie you can have in cycling groups. I get it. It's just that going hard, going real intense, doing hill day on the bike every single day is really not advised. You want to make sure that you stretch out that frequency a little bit. But cardio is something that you can do every day. I know people that swim every day, people that run every day, and do it correctly. I mean, it's as much for their mind as it is for their body. And they're in a state of what I call keeping the ball in the air. Now, what's happening in your body when you do that, a little bit lower intensity, but steady, more endurance type, more aerobic type work versus anaerobic. Remember the difference between aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic means with oxygen. Anaerobic means without oxygen. You can run a marathon or run 3 miles and you can complain about it for the entire 3 miles because you can still talk. But when you sprint, buddy, you're good for about 100 yards and that's it. You're out of breath. You cannot talk. Anaerobic means without oxygen. But keeping something on an aerobic pace, an endurance pace, you can do that every single day. And so the cardio frequency is a little bit different than the strength training frequency. So those individuals that try to do resistance training every day, well, I'd caution you on that. In fact, the only time I would typically recommend doing resistance training every day for the same body part is when you're doing very minimal, like I say, with the cardio, keeping the ball in the air. I do 20 push-ups a day. I do my sit-ups every day, but not a full involved half-hour abdominal workout every day. That's going to cause overuse injuries, and therefore frequency is extremely important to be concerned with there. Intensity has to do with how hard you're working during an exercise, and how you can change the intensity depends on the type of workout you're doing. Now let's go back to strength training. Monitoring the intensity of strength training involves a different set of parameters. Now you can do it a few different ways. Your intensity is not only made up of the exercise that you're doing, but it's also made up of your resistance. In other words, the amount of weight you lift and the number of reps and sets you do. So it's one thing, the intensity is involved in the amount of weight. Let's say we're going to bench press 160 pounds. Okay, we're going to do 160 pounds one time. Well, that's the low intensity for some people, high intensity for others. But it could be a very low intensity for you. But then you add, I'm going to do 6 sets of 15 reps. All right, now you've just increased the intensity. So a few different ways of changing your intensity in your strength training program. And that's very important. I'll talk about that in a minute, about the ability to change intensity. Cardiovascular, believe it or not, is much the same way. It's usually monitored by heart rate or perceived exertion, what we call the talk test, and that is, can you still converse and are you still in that endurance area? The talk test determines whether or not you're within that 70 to 75% zone of your heart rate rather than being in 85 or 80 or 85 or even above that, because if you're able to talk, then you're still in that with oxygen aerobic capacity. And most likely, unless you're going for a real long time, we'll get into time in a minute, then you should be staying in an aerobic state and should be not breaking down a whole lot of muscle tissue. Therefore, you should be able to repeat it the next day. The general recommendation is to work at a moderate intensity for steady state workouts. Now, interval training is done at a high intensity, and people put this in the cardio realm. It depends on what exercise you're doing, on whether or not the interval workouts would be in the cardio zone. I mean, you can do interval workouts with resistance training too. But interval workouts is a mixture of low, medium, and high intensity cardio exercises that stimulate different energy systems. And if you change them right and avoid overtraining, it's a fantastic way to go about your program. But interval training is yet another way of controlling your intensity in your cardio exercise. The next element of your workout plan is how long you exercise during each session. Now, there's not one set rule for how long you should exercise, and it will typically depend on your fitness level and the type of workout you're doing. It's if the more aggressive, typically the shorter amount of time you could spend, and the shorter amount of time you need to spend, and of course you can go longer with less aggressive. But the aggressive in this case goes back to intensity. That's why I was telling you that all these are related to each other. When considering one, you consider the whole. For cardio and time, the exercise guidelines suggest 30 to 60 minutes of cardio. You'll see this with Cooper's, you'll see this with Mayo Clinic, you'll see this with National Institute of Health. It's 30 to 60 minutes of cardio, but the duration of your workout, it depends on what you're doing. Now, if you're a beginner, you might start with a workout of 15 to 20 minutes. That's okay. I'm quick to say that because how many people avoid exercise altogether if they're not able to exercise for this long extended amount of time that they heard they're supposed to do? I didn't have time to do 30 minutes, so I didn't do it at all. Hey, worst comes to worst, get 10 minutes, get 15 minutes, get 20 minutes. Build up to where you have the time. If you're doing steady state cardio, such as going for a run or getting on a cardio machine, you might exercise for 30 to 60 minutes. If you're doing interval training and working at a very high intensity, your workout will obviously be shorter. Doing sprints repetitively, your workout's going to be shorter. Having a variety of workouts of different intensities and durations will give you a solid, balanced cardio program. Also, I highly recommend the variety. We have a lot of people, including myself, that I have certain types of workouts that I like to do for myself that I enjoy. And when I say type of workout, I call it the light at the end of the tunnel workout. I like it short, but I like it intense. If it's short and intense, then I can see the end of the workout. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'll go hard if I don't have to go hard for a long time. Some people would rather plod through. And I don't mean plod in a negative way. That's just what works for them. They would rather take the time, go a little deeper in the muscle, maybe not as intense, maybe not as fast paced, but longer in the time. Back to time. With strength training, it's the same concept as cardio. How long you lift weights depends on the type of workout you're doing and your schedule. For example, a total body workout. Now, remember when I was talking about the different splits, 4 days a week or 3 days a week or what have you of resistance training. The less days that you are actually working out, typically the more muscles you work. So a total body, doing full body workout, that could take a lot longer. It can take an hour. Whereas a split routine could take less time because you're working fewer muscle groups. So another good way of looking at it, again, it's what works for your head, not just something you saw somebody do. What works for your head? What do you see getting through easier? Now, the last one is type, and I'm not a huge fan of putting type in the FITT principle. I think type is important, but I don't like to put it in the FITT principle because actually you answered it all when you deal with frequency, intensity, and time. But the type of exercise you do is the last part of the FITT principle, supposedly. And it's an easy one to manipulate to avoid overuse injuries or weight loss plateaus, which is the whole reason I put this in. It deals with the way your body responds to it. Let's say you keep your intensity level the same, measurably. I mean, you've got a heart rate monitor on and you're keeping your heart rate at the same rate you've always done. But you switch exercise. You go from a treadmill to an elliptical. Well, the reason they're using type in here is because when you move to the elliptical, and you may be at the same intensity level, but you're working different muscles. You're hitting the muscle a different way. Exercise is like medicine. When you take a medicine, let's say aspirin, I like to use that example because a lot of people take baby aspirin for blood pressure and for thinning blood, I should say, and actually without blood pressure. But if you take one aspirin a day, pretty soon you're going to need to take more if you want to get rid of a headache. You follow me? If you're taking one aspirin a day, and that used to take care of a headache, but now you're taking one aspirin a day every day for your blood, next time you need a headache, you may need to take more than one because your body gets used to it. Your body develops an immunity to the change, I guess you'd say. And think about it. This is pretty easy to understand. If I sit and I do bench press, and I'm going to bench press 200 pounds, and I do it 10 times for one set, and I keep doing it 10 times for one set. Every time I come back, spacing my days out, having the right frequency, and keeping the intensity the same. I space those days out, and I keep doing the exact same 200 pounds. Pretty soon, it's going to become easy. Why? My body has developed the strength, therefore that is no longer challenging the muscle. And it's developed what you would refer to as an immunity to it, just like medication. So you can do that once you are working with a certain exercise. If you keep changing the frequency, the intensity, or the time, it will become harder or easier depending on which way you're going on the scale. And you will make changes. But if you change to a completely different exercise, you go from push-ups to bench press, or from the lat pull down to the row machine. Now you're working that muscle, but you're working it in a whole different way. Therefore, your body is not used to that way of doing it. And it becomes more challenging. It reacts differently. It has not built up the immunity to it. That's why type makes it into this listing, which I think is important, but I'd still believe the original FITT, frequency, intensity, or time, are things to be concerned about with your workout. Different ways that the FITT principle can help your workout. Well, like I said a minute ago, your body becomes more efficient at exercise. 200 pounds, 10 times on a bench press, doing it several weeks. Pretty soon, it's not difficult. That's what they mean by becoming more efficient. The more you work out, the easier it is to do the exercises, causing you to burn fewer calories than you did when you started. So in changing the type of workout, changing the type of exercise, changing the frequency, intensity, or time, the body becomes more inefficient, which allows it to burn more calories, break down more muscle tissue, get more development, more growth, more changes. Weight loss is the same way. Pretty soon, your body gets used to that cardiovascular work, and it's not going to burn the same amount of calories. So changing that intensity level, changing that frequency, changing that time, one of those three, and even your type can actually help you increase your weight loss. And one of the easiest, it's fantastic. I like it because it speaks to mindset. And you know how important I believe mindset is, and that is sheer boredom. Just getting sick of doing the same thing so much so that you actually want to just quit. Well, then that's time to change gears. That's time to change frequency, intensity, time, and possibly type. Changing frequency is very easy. How often you can go from 1 day to 2 days. You're going to go from 3 days a week to 5 days a week. Very simple. Changing the intensity, simply. Make it faster. Make it harder. Make it heavier. Changing the time, go for a longer walk, go for a longer time. And changing the type, I said earlier, going from walking to swimming or elliptical to walking, whatever, your body responds a little different. Now, there's another reason I bring up the FITT principle, frequency, intensity, time. Is there a time when you would not adjust one of those in your workout? And believe it or not, the answer is yes. While you ponder that, I've got to get caught up in my water here. I'm late into the podcast and I haven't even brought up water. Can you believe I have not brought up water already in this podcast? So about to finish the thing and I still haven't brought up water. Folks, I'm at 70 ounces. I hope you're keeping up. Make sure you stay hydrated daily. It is the magic pill. It is the best nutritional advice I can possibly give you. But is there a time when you would not change frequency, intensity, or time? Actually, there is. And it's rather important. Too many times as a trainer, we are looked at as we're going to make somebody better. And I more than understand that. I've built a living on making people better, on helping them find their level of wellness. But that last part I just said, that finding your level of wellness, is incredibly important. And if you are wrapped up with getting stronger, faster, all the time, constantly, without a goal in sight, that could be bad. Don't get me wrong. Fantastic to have those challenges. Very motivational. But too many times I have people sit in my office and talk about, back when I was XYZ number on the calendar, I could do this, that, and the other, and these amazing physical things. And all I can think at that time is, did this person know that at that time? When that person was so incredible physically, did they know it?
I think this is where we cue up Cinderella. Don't know what you got till it's gone.
Bingo, exactly. I'm wanting to bring back that 90s hairband rock. I really am. So absolutely. Don't know what, that is a great example. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, don't know what you got until it's gone. It's true. Too many times I think about that. I wonder if people really realize it. They talk about it, the glory days, but did you know the glory days when you were in them? And we have a lot of clients that, of course, always trying to get better, and that's great. That's fantastic. Nothing wrong with that. I do it myself. I still do not feel I've run my fastest race. I still don't feel that I've scored high enough in my world championship racing for Team USA, and not even at nationals. I still feel I can do better, but you're not happy with your goals. You're not happy with your accomplishments. It's just a constant change. Be careful. Too many times we've seen this as a sign of exercise overuse or exercise abuse. It's much like alcoholism. It's much like trying to treat another problem going on with a substance or with an activity. In this case, it happens to be exercise. You see this a lot with people changing their hairstyles a lot when there's different things going on wrong in their life. Not really the subject of the podcast today, but just something to be concerned with, because I've got individuals that have reached their level of wellness and their frequency, intensity, and time many times doesn't change a whole lot. I have a fantastic example. It happens to be a client that I've worked with for over 20 years, and he got to a certain level within the first year that we worked with him, and we've just kept him there. He has what a lot of people would think of as probably the most boring workout routine. But he told me when he started, still says it to this day, I basically wanted to get to a certain level and just stay there. And we never really think about, we think about getting better. We definitely don't want to get worse. But do you ever really think about the idea of, all right, Julie, listen, not going to make you any better, but you're not going to get any worse. And you're going to stay like that for the next 20 years. How many people would actually take that deal? Frequency, intensity, time, and even type, fantastic methods for improving your routine. Always should be a part of your program somewhere. Just make sure you keep it in check. It always is much better to seek and live your level of wellness.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.